will know the brand well, but this is presented by Dennis, but it is the Week Junior. So the Week Junior is a brilliant brand for Dennis. It's an award-winning news weekly magazine aimed very squarely at 8 to 14-year-olds. We publish it both in the UK, and I believe it's 5 years old now. Anna was saying the other day, so we are 5 years old. Not quite today, but we are 5 years old. And we've just launched in the US as well, which again has been a really exciting story actually for us during the pandemic, because the Week US was launched as we went into lockdown. So it was pretty incredible launching a brand with everything happening. So both in the US and the UK. Our session today will be presented by both Seema Hope. Seema's our Research and Insight Director at Dennis, and Anna Bassi, who's our Editor-in-Chief on the Week Junior. So you'll be hearing lots from those guys in a couple of minutes. And just to recap on the session itself, one thing that we find constantly really with creating great content through the Week Junior is that kids have more influence on family and parent lives than really ever before. And that's everything from lifestyle purchasing decisions, but also through to the really serious topics. And again, we know that 2020 has been a year that's been full of news, everything from the pandemic to the environment to, you know, the election, which is obviously happening today over in the US. And kids are really influential in their opinions on that. So we want to kind of tap into that really. And really this session, you know, is about learning more about the you know, this kind of amazing generation, Gen Alpha, how they're adapting to the lockdown, their distinct voice. And really, and very importantly in a session like this, why marketeers need to pay attention to this group. So we're going to be exploring quite a broad range of topics in this session. So we'll be talking about a lot. In terms of the session itself, we are going to be running some video about halfway through, because it's you know, obviously very important to hear from Anna and Seema, but we also want to hear from the kids themselves. So we've got some sound bites from the kids. We will be streaming video through Zoom, so that should all work. We've practiced that to make sure it's okay. So we're about halfway through, we will be running that video. So hopefully that will run okay for everyone. And then right at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A as well. So any questions you have during the session, please do put them into the chat and we can pick them up from there. Alternatively, you can send me a kind of direct message as well. So we'll make sure we'll pull those questions together and we'll have about a 10-15 minute kind of Q&A at the end of the session. So keep those questions coming as we go through. Okay, that's all from me. I'm going to hand over now to Seema so we can get into the session. So over to you, Seema.
Hello. Hi, thank you very much for that intro, John. So in this session, we'll be covering off quite a few topics, not just about COVID, but just about this amazing generation, Gen Alpha, as we can call them. And they've had quite an interesting year. They've adapted really well to a crazy year of twists and turns, a full lockdown, then going back to school, and now, as of tomorrow, the second lockdown. So we'll be hearing about how they've adapted and how a brand like the Week Junior has kind of been on the journey with them. So children and young people are more informed than ever before. They're very aware of world events and the world around them, not just through our brands, but also through their topics through school and playground and their access to technology. And they just have much more available to them at their fingertips. And they have a very distinct and powerful voice, and one that we believe that marketeers really do want to pay attention to. So starting with technology, it's a constant battle. Parents have always had this battle with screens, especially over the last 5 years as smartphones are infiltrating younger and younger kids, iPads as well, and on-demand and television. But that really has changed quite significantly this year. Full lockdown has really changed our relationship with technology, and with the winter months approaching and a second lockdown and a ban on grassroots sports, we do think that relationship with technology is going to be changing. So Anna, how have you found that children and parents have adapted their relationship with technology this year?
I think it's been really interesting because obviously social media and screens in general have been viewed for quite a long time as real threats to children's, you know, their attention, their ability to absorb information. It's something that they're doing when they maybe should be reading a book or doing something more constructive. But obviously over lockdown, when everything was taken away from kids, you know, school in the first lockdown, obviously, friends, family that didn't live within the same household, it very quickly became a lifeline, just as it did for most of us as well. So I think there was a very quick turnaround, and I think it's no surprise that actually screen time increased quite dramatically during the first lockdown. And those who had access to the tech moved everything online. So whether that was doing schoolwork on Google Classroom, or, you know, and actually for a lot of kids, it wasn't just accessing schoolwork, it was actually doing schoolwork with their friends. So they might be working in Google Classroom, but using WhatsApp video to collaborate with classmates, or, you know, doing the Joe Wicks workouts on YouTube, or doing their Zoom quiz nights with their grandparents, or hanging out with their mates on house party. It became a sort of a, you know, it became everything really, and kind of allowed kids to really maintain those social bonds that otherwise they could very easily lose, and very easily and very quickly become quite isolated. The other thing I think that's quite interesting is that gaming also, so aside from social media and other sort of screen-based activities, gaming in particular really took off, not just as purely gaming and playing with friends, but actually, you know, places like Fortnite and Minecraft and Among Us become digital playgrounds. They're places where kids go to chat with their friends and hang out with their friends, as well as to actually game with them. So I think, you know, it's changed everybody's view. I think for a lot of parents who previously felt guilty about how much time they allowed their children to spend on screen, that guilt kind of dissipated quite quickly, especially in the face of parents trying to work and trying to keep their children occupied at the same time. I think it's, you know, it certainly would have helped to reduce anxiety in a lot of households, I would have thought. And actually what's quite interesting, what I found quite interesting actually post-lockdown, was a piece of research that was produced by a mental health charity called Me Too, who work with young people on mental health issues. They actually found that anxiety and other mental health concerns decreased quite significantly during lockdown, which kind of countered all trends. Everybody thought there'd be a real increase in these problems for kids, and actually for most of them, once the initial anxiety was over and they found ways to stay in touch with other people and to remain connected to the world, anxiety was reduced quite a lot. And that remained the case right up until they went back to school again. And the prospect of kind of having to get back into the real world again, step out of the virtual world, get into the real world and deal with those friendships and kind of social politics, actually saw a bit of a spike coming back. So yeah, overall, I think the sort of the online world has really kind of had a transformation for most families.
Absolutely. So it's not necessarily the root of all evil, as the bad press that it's been getting over the last 5 years. Yeah, so how has the brand, The Week Junior, adapted this year in particular to the changing behaviours, going through a full lockdown, guiding children back to school, and now obviously a second lockdown looming? How has the brand adapted through all of this?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot to think about, really. And The Week Junior as a brand is, you know, it's all about positivity. It's about encouraging children to engage with the world and to find out about the world, and to really, you know, not just to, obviously we do cover a lot of serious subject matter within the magazine, but overall the tone of the magazine is very optimistic and hopeful. So I guess the challenge for us in terms of our content at the beginning of this was twofold. Firstly, it was actually, when it came to the news, how do we write about something like COVID for a young audience when, you know, they are, like the rest of us, actually quite powerless in the face of it. And you know, at the beginning of it, and certainly for the first few weeks of lockdown, the only news about coronavirus was focused on really quite grim statistics and you know, and stories that made everybody feel worried and concerned. So as a team, we put our heads together and thought about how we could turn this into something that would not add to any anxiety that children were feeling, but actually give them something hopeful to focus on. So our news content at that time didn't really focus on you know, infections growing and death and the sort of awful scenes that we were seeing in the National Health Service on the news. And instead we focused on the people who were helping. So the positive stories that, you know, the National Health Service workers who were absolutely heroic, and all the other key workers that we were celebrating every week on our doorsteps. People like Sir Tom Moore and, you know, his incredible fundraising achievements, kids setting up, you know, great community initiatives to get food to elderly neighbours, and scientists as well, you know, actually kind of focusing on the efforts of the experts who we are now really dependent upon to kind of find a path out of this for all of us. So it was all about looking for hope and positivity in our news coverage. And then when it came to our other feature content, obviously we had to pivot quite quickly there, because much of that is planned around you know, entertainment and sport and the big events like the Olympics and big movie releases that obviously were no longer going to happen. So the team again had quite a challenge on their hands there to replan, you know, into an indefinite future at the beginning of lockdown at least. So we then looked at, you know, what can we bring our readers that will keep them occupied, will keep them entertained while they're stuck at home. So we quickly commissioned a series of workouts that they could do at home in a little space without any special equipment. We told them all about the virtual safaris and tours and museums and galleries and so on that they could visit, so, you know, they could continue to explore the world. We highlighted all kinds of family things, you know, board games, quizzes, how to stay in touch with grandparents, writing letters, you know, looking at a lot of offline activity as well. And, you know, and overall it really was just about how can we help them to fill their time, give them some structure, and actually help parents as well, because, you know, again, those days are long, especially when there wasn't necessarily regular school, and parents were trying to do their work as well as look after and potentially try to educate their children. And we know that a lot of families really valued what we did, and we saw our subscription numbers increasing through lockdown, as well as parents kind of turned to the Week Junior as a useful resource, and perhaps something that provided a sort of a sense of regularity as well. As it came through the door every week, it became something to look forward to. So I think you know, it was a very busy time for the team, but you know, we had great feedback from our readers, we had great feedback from parents. We saw children becoming incredibly creative through lockdown as well. So not only taking inspiration from the magazine, but also just, you know, coming up with their own ideas for things like podcasts and building websites and creating online newspapers. There were virtual choirs. We were sent videos of kids singing, dancing, performing poems, and even, you know, making their own adverts for the Week Junior. So there was a real kind of creative energy, I think, during lockdown that kids were able to turn to good use.
So providing a helping hand for parents, but also providing positivity and optimism in what had been a very difficult year is an important message, isn't it, really? Wanted to touch on Gen Alpha and just kind of clarify what we mean by this generation. And the Week target audience is 8 to 14. Gen Alpha are children born from about 2011 to 2025, up to that age group. And what we're finding through early research is that they're incredibly powerful in terms of their opinions, and what makes them quite interesting as well is that they're not afraid to express their opinions, and we find that through our interactions with our readers. They certainly have a lot to tell us, but also through our surveys and the research that we do, both here in the UK and US. They're also the first group to be born with millennials as parents, so the parental styling is always changing, and there are trends that are evolving, but millennials have a much more what we call less of a hierarchical relationship with their children. They tend to want to have very open discussions with their children, and it seems that very little is off the table in terms of topics as well. They're much more broader range of family discussions, and potentially this could be up to 2 billion children globally, so a huge new group of emerging and interesting opinions coming through. But what we also wanted to discuss today was how they're encouraging family discussions and family decisions that are being made. So our colleagues over at Beano, who we worked on with some research, shared some stuff with us, and we found that a quarter have encouraged their parents to switch to products that are better for the planet. 21% have encouraged their parents and family to eat less meat. nearly half, about 49%, influence the weekly shop. So again, what's going into the basket, online shopping, again, some seems to be an activity that the whole family do get involved in, and huge. And about 76% say they have a range, they have a say in their range of family decisions, such as what car they're going to buy next, right through to potential holiday destinations. So again, these discussions have been going on through lockdown. Unfortunately, the holidays are on hold, but the huge trend towards staycations and potential holidays will be coming up over the next few years, hopefully. All discussions that have changed quite a lot this year. And kids have always been known for their pasta power. That's not new, but how their influence has changed over this year and over this Gen Alpha. They seem to be more guided by their moral compass than ever before, and they seem to be using their pesta for good, rather than just demanding sweets and chocolates at supermarkets. So they really are seen as more lobbyists at home, and one of the biggest topics that families are discussing is climate change and sustainability, and how brands are reacting to that as well. But let's hear from kids themselves, because they're the best advocates. And John, can we cut to the videos, please?
Yes, we can. Just I'll get my
seamlessly.
See, absolutely seamlessly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think we can hear the sound from the videos.
We'll play that again.
Apologies, was there no sound from the video? Thank you for letting me know. Hang on a second.
Can't ignore it, and that they need to do it not for just.
Okay.
That works. I think it was just you can't unmute, John.
Oh, okay, fine. So yeah, so that was right. Fine. Thank you very much for that. You see, there we go. There was a small technical issue.
I know that Pops have raised money for RSPCA by releasing an exclusive Pop, and I know that other food brands like McDonald's and Prezzo have changed their straws to paper straws instead of plastic straws. Pop Funko, and I would make their boxing. I would make it less cardboard and more out of recyclables or paper. And I would make their products, the figures, out of recyclable plastic. That I know they want to ignore it, but they can't ignore it. And that they need to do it not for just their customers, but for the animals as well.
Well, I was learning about Nike and how they treated all their workers and how they weren't being paid enough and they were working in really poor conditions. So I stopped buying from there because I just thought it was a bit unfair if I did. Well, Starbucks, I know that they give like some of the money that they earn to like the chosen charity of the month. So it makes me feel quite good because I know that I'm giving money to charity as well as a drink for myself. I'd find substitutes for things that are bad for the environment. Like I would use cardboard cups instead of plastic. I would also give like some of the earnings to charity, so it will encourage people to buy from my company and it will make them feel good about what they've bought.
Some of the shops like Primark use paper bags. I know Nike use plastic bags, but Primark use paper bags. I think they should like all be using paper bags, and for Apple, because their phones have like plastic on the front and back, just like not, because they're coming from a box, they don't really need it. But I know that they probably won't do anything.
McDonald's, instead of having plastic straws, they've changed it to all paper straws now. Adidas, they've stopped wrapping some of the stuff in plastic. Sometimes now you get it not wrapped in plastic, just in the box, but sometimes you still get it wrapped in plastic. Yes, because at the top of the cups, they have a plastic circle and it's quite big for the straw to go into. So I think they could change that into a different material. I would change all the plastic bags to paper bags, and also at the end of the shoelaces, they've got plastic, and sometimes it falls off, so people keep putting more sellotape onto it, which is wasting plastic. So instead of plastic, I would use like rubber or something, because you can put it back on more easily.
Well, they probably use big brands, like big clothing brands. They use a lot of animal skin, which is bad for the animals. And they probably use a lot of like gases for their machines to make clothes and shoes. If let's say like they use animal skin, so I would stop using animal skin and then use materials that don't affect the earth.
Yeah.
I would shut down all the machines that use gases that release into the earth. So it's a better breathing place. And make sure that any things that are bad for the earth aren't used in the brand. Well, it's not just them in the world, it's the whole earth. And it's probably a win-win, because a lot of people want to help climate change.
There we go. Hopefully everyone could hear that okay.
So a lot of great examples of what kids are feeling very passionate about. And one thing that does come out again and again is the environment and plastic. I think if we counted how many times plastic was mentioned through that video, you'd get quite high. But so what, and again, their knowledge and workers' rights is something that we've picked up quite a lot on as well. And just anecdotally, we've heard some kids who've received Christmas vouchers. This was last year. From certain brands who ordinarily there'd be great Christmas vouchers to go and spend, but a few kids have said, I don't want to go into the shop because I've heard that they don't treat their workers. So it's really, really important that brands get it right and are authentic. And so, Anna, how has the Week Junior channeled the energy of this generation? Because they certainly have a lot to say about environment, amongst other things as well.
They have a lot to say, yeah, particularly about the environment, but just in general, we're really interested in hearing what children have to say, and we do regularly seek and get feedback from them. And the great thing about kids is that they are really honest. They are refreshingly honest in their opinions. They're not scared to criticize us. They're not shy of saying what they think is right or wrong, and telling us what matters to them. And that's great for us as an editorial team, because it helps us to understand what they care about, and it also helps us to set our own editorial course and evolve the magazine as we go along and over the years as things change. One of the things that we include in the magazine every week is a big debate feature. And that's where we ask readers to read about an issue and to express their views on it by voting on an can't get the words out, in an online poll. And the results of these are always really interesting, because they really indicate what our readers feel strongly about, not just in the way that they vote, but also the number of kids that will vote on particular topics as well. And so we can see, they do feel very strongly about the environment. Plastic pollution in particular is a real hot topic. Animal welfare, online safety is really important to them as well, and as well as other topics like schoolwork and holidays, and really light issues such as whether or not parents should be allowed to dance in public, which you'd be not surprised to know 84% of our readers said that parents definitely shouldn't be allowed to dance in public. But on sort of a more serious note, here's a couple of examples of some of the big debates that have had a really high response. So we asked readers whether theatres and museums and galleries should accept money from fossil fuel companies, and 74% of them voted no, they shouldn't. We asked them if they thought that whaling should be completely banned, and 94% of our readers thought that it should be. We asked them whether products such as household appliances should be made to last longer. 95% of our readers said yes. So they really do care about the world that they're living in and the impact that our choices and lifestyles and industry have upon it. When we surveyed our readers ahead of last year's general election, the issue that they felt should be a top priority for the new Prime Minister was climate change. And interestingly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, that was mirrored by, or mirrored in a national survey that was conducted for our US edition just very recently ahead of today's election. And again, young people put looking after our planet at the top of the pile for the new president. So it's really, you know, it's very, very clear what they care about. And that, you know, that passion for the environment and that concern about what climate change means for their future, as well as for animals and, you know, and everybody else as well, has led us to make some decisions as well, as a not just editorial, but in terms of how we, you know, how we deliver our magazine. So last year, or just over a year ago, it was in August last year, we decided to start delivering the Week Junior unwrapped. And previously it was posted out from launch, it was posted out in a recyclable plastic wrapper, which we'd obviously chosen because we thought that was the right thing to do in terms of the environment. But actually, a lot of our readers over the years got in touch with us to complain that they couldn't recycle the wrapper very easily. In fact, it wasn't picked up at curbside. There weren't many facilities where they could take it. So on the one hand, while we were writing a lot about the climate, about the environment and climate change and some of the problems that the world was facing, and also offering some solutions to readers, our readers felt that actually we were being quite hypocritical by writing about these things, but actually potentially contributing to the problem in our own way. And actually, you know, some of them politely asked us to do something about it. Others threatened to cancel their subscriptions if we didn't. So we couldn't ignore them. We couldn't ignore them anyway. We had to take it seriously. And it's a decision that I think, you know, I hope we would have got to by ourselves eventually, but actually, certainly the readers and the feedback we got from our readers really got us moving on it and made us do something a bit faster. And it was a really positive change. So we, you know, we did do a little bit of research into alternative wrappings. We looked at compostable wrappings, we looked at paper envelopes, and we asked a sort of a sample of readers how they would feel about getting it with no wrapper on. We actually posted out thousands of magazines to subscribers to see what condition they arrived in and asked them to feed back to us. And the response to that was overwhelmingly positive. You know, most issues actually arrived unscathed. Some arrived with a little bit of damage, but the vast majority of our readers were more than happy to get the magazine without a wrapper, even if it meant that it would be slightly damaged. You know, if there was a risk of it being ripped, they would still prefer to do the right thing and protect the planet and to support us in doing that than to do anything else. So that was, I mean, I would say for us, although there've been, you know, many interactions with readers that have led us to make changes to content, that's probably the biggest thing that we've done in response to feedback from young people, and, you know, genuinely demonstrates how powerful their influence is.
You're on mute.
Unmute. How did I go on mute? Sorry about that. One thing that I have noticed that the Week Junior doesn't avoid difficult conversations. Looking back at some of the front covers that the Week Junior has produced, both in the UK and the US, we don't shy away from any topic really. For example, Black Lives Matter and some of the divisive politics. So how have you found writing for this audience, Anna, over the years, and writing and explaining difficult topics for this generation?
Well, I would say it's never easy to do. It's always quite challenging to write about. I mean, I think writing about some of these things for an adult audience is challenging, and then we have to layer on top of that the fact that our readers are young, may not have the sort of contextual information that an adult will have, and also will feel often quite powerless as a child to do anything about some of these problems. So we're always extremely careful, but we don't shy away from doing it. You know, we had, in fact, when we launched almost 5 years ago here in the UK, we had planned to launch with a great celebration, you know, of a cover to sort of announce our arrival. And in fact, the first issue went to press just after the awful terror attacks in Paris. So we had to confront that in our very first issue. We couldn't not write about it, because we'd always said that we would write about the tough topics, and so we did. And you know, our approach to it has always been, you know, don't shy away from it, be honest. don't kind of put cotton wool around a subject, but also at the same time, obviously, don't go into gratuitous detail that a child doesn't need to read, and certainly always think about what the impact is going to be on a child. So as a general rule, the formula that we apply to any difficult story, whether that is a terror attack or the death of George Floyd, or even the presidential election and what the sort of outcome of that might be, is to look for positives. So we will explain the facts, we'll always explain the facts. We will also always consider the questions that a child will have, and we'll always try to provide some context and background so that things, we can begin to make sense of a situation. But we will very quickly, and again, especially in the case of some sort of a tragic event, we will move on very quickly to the people that are helping and the things that people are doing to make things safer, make things better, find a solution and what might happen next. So we try to reassure our readers. And the other thing that we do is to try to help parents as well. So something that we started doing quite early on, if we were writing about a potentially upsetting event for young people, we would give the parents a heads up that we were planning to do that, usually on social media, so that they're prepared for it. Because the fact is, most children now have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the world, even without us, even without the Week Junior. They are on social media. The news is 24 hours. It's on TV. It's on the radio. It's online. It's hard to avoid, and there is a lot of misinformation, and there are a lot of things that children don't understand. So, we explain that we are writing about these things because we believe that children will find out about them anyway, and we think it's better to sort of get out in front of it and sort of give them the right information rather than risk them hearing things that aren't true, or that they, that have been taken out of context perhaps. And we'll also look to provide some help to parents as well in terms of how to address these topics with children. If a child is upset or a child wants to talk about it, the worst thing you can do is to sort of brush it away or to pretend it hasn't happened. That you really do have to be honest, and that children are interested, and they do want to understand what's happening. So it's important that you take that seriously. And that's our approach always in the Week Junior, is to treat our readers with some respect. They may be children, but they're serious human beings who have legitimate concerns and questions. So we will always kind of have that eyeball to eyeball conversation with them. We're not patronising, and we don't sugarcoat. But we also always look for balance. So obviously within any issue where there's a story that's particularly serious, we will always seek to create a balance. So there will be a whole range of stories. There may be one big story about something awful about COVID, and perhaps about this week's lockdown and how that will affect families. But elsewhere in the issue, there will be stories of incredible scientific discoveries, or pictures of beautiful animals and profiles of people who are doing inspiring things. So there's always a balance. It's really important to me and to the rest of the team that we don't play into the hands of those who want everything to be a crisis and want everything to be hysterical. It's we stay calm and we stay confident and we remain positive. And I think that's really important, because kids are, they may well be opinionated, and they may well be very strong-minded, and they're clearly finding their own way and finding their own opinions, but they are also kids who don't really have, they may be able to influence their parents to buy a new console, but they don't have much power when it comes to political turmoil or environmental difficulties. So we have to give them confidence, and we have to empower them to sort of do the little things they can, and to hopefully give them an optimistic outlook and feel as though there are things that can be done, and things can change, and it isn't all bad.
Absolutely, there's always something in there to make them smile as well.
Yes.
So it's not just the children that value the magazine, from what you're saying as well. So what we've found through our research, that actually a lot of the adults are reading, and grandparents are reading the Week Junior as well, and that could be down to the easy way you explain difficult topics, but also to encourage those conversations. And what we found over the years is that parents and adults in households are saying that they've really noticed an improvement in their children's news and current affairs knowledge. Like you say, they're exposed to so much anyway, but what we want is to provide a trusted environment for them to explore the world around them. And they're definitely, we're getting so much more feedback about how they're having much more topical discussions at home. And that in turn influences some of the, say, purchasing decisions that they in turn might be making, but also just in that kind of open discussion that parents are able to have with their children, and enable them to sort of navigate their way around difficult subjects, but also the light-hearted stuff that's covered in the magazine as well. And our latest research from our American colleagues just kind of back that up as well, just that over the years we found that trend continuing, but just something from last month, that 85, huge percentage, believe that it's important for children to learn what's about events from around the world. So it's not just local events, they are very much interested in the world around them. They definitely have a thirst for knowledge. So have you found that children and families are having different conversations? Is it different over the years, or do you just feel that this is just an overall trend that is happening just because children are more exposed to the news and the world around them?
Well, certainly from the perspective of the Week Junior, we've had, really great feedback from parents and grandparents thanking us, firstly for explaining things to their children so clearly and sensitively, but also for helping them to understand some fairly complex topics as well. And it's definitely sparking conversations and dinner table debates. But it's also, what I found quite interesting is we know that, obviously the magazine is for 8 to 14-year-olds. We know that parents like reading it, but we also hear of grandparents who enjoy reading it, and great grandparents even. There was one, I remember one email telling us about an entire, 4 generations of a family who would read the Week Junior. Once the child had finished with it, it would go to the parent, and the parent would give it to the grandmother, and the grandmother would give it to a neighbour. So it spreads far and wide. And again, through lockdown, we heard from quite a few families who told us that the magazine had been used as a way for to bring families together over a distance as well. So, there was one, I think this is from the American edition actually, a grandmother who had subscribed to the Week Junior for her grandchildren, and then would meet up with them on Zoom every week to talk about the Week Junior and what they'd learnt in there. So it is, it's sparking conversations, it's sparking, it's helping children to form opinions as well. There's nothing like, we, I think on Twitter, it was a couple of years ago, we had a message from somebody who said, "Oh, I'm just about to put my child to bed and they want to talk about what's happening in North Korea at the moment. Thanks, the Week Junior." I think it was meant slightly sarcastically because I think the child was actually meant to be going to bed. But, I can't imagine that before the magazine existed, there were many children who wanted to talk to their parents about North Korea, or quite so many children having a, quite an impassioned opinion on the presidential election or Brexit, here as well. So yeah, I think it is a force for good, and I think where we have been able to add value to the conversation is, because we know children are getting news from other places, but what we've been able to do is to create something that is, factually accurate and that parents trust. So it becomes a place that they feel confident to allow their children to explore what's happening in the world. They don't think that they're going to be exposed to anything that might harm them or that might not be true. So I think that degree of trust has also allowed conversations to open up where maybe they might not have done previously.
Absolutely. Do you know, actually the first thing my 8-year-old asked me this morning is whether Trump was in. Normally the first thing is, where are my football boots, or what am I having for my packed lunch? But the first conversation this morning was straight down to American politics, which again I never thought I'd see happening. But anyway, it will take us many more months and years to really understand the true impact of COVID and the lockdown has had on children and wider society. And what we're finding is that, like you were saying earlier, it hasn't, children are incredibly resilient. It hasn't been all as negative as we'd like to hear on some mainstream media. In fact, mental health has actually improved in some cases, but not shying away from the impact that it has had on wider society and the range of different social groups in the UK and the world. So what do you see as the role of a brand like The Week Junior to guide us through this? And it's children and families who are looking for brands like The Week Junior, and also just other media outlets to guide us through these times.
I think, I mean, as far as The Week Junior is concerned, I think we just need to keep on doing what we do best, and that is making sense of the world for a young audience. So I think, you know, my absolute priority, along with the rest of my team, is to make sure that we continue to do that, that we continue to, you know, that we continue to check every fact, that we continue to provide balance and unbiased information to our readers. I think we've got to, you know, we really value the trust that the parents or just, you know, subscribing adults have placed in us. So we need to pay that back. We need to keep listening to them. We need to keep, you know, we need to keep talking to our readers, and we need to keep talking to their parents as well to find out what they need from us. And I think, you know, it's our job to sort of provide that clarity, I suppose, that clarity, and to maintain a sort of a very clear path that we will take, and hopefully take our readers with us, which is a path that involves being informed, you know, not being shy to ask questions, you know, continuing to be curious about the world, and not to be scared of it. I think is a really, I think especially in times like these, you know, obviously we're living through a pandemic, and, you know, it is incredible how resilient children are. They really are, you know, so much more adaptable than you know, you possibly think they might be, as are all of us, actually. I think, you know, it's been an incredible year in so many different ways. You know, and ultimately, I think we just have to keep promoting all the right qualities. We want our readers to be empathetic. We want them to be tolerant. We want them to be anti-racist. We want them to be kind overall. So going forwards into next year, you know, we'll continue to promote qualities like that within our editorial. I do think that we will place a greater emphasis perhaps on features and content around mental health, because although, as I said, you know, actually the lockdown wasn't perhaps quite so bad as it had been anticipated for children's mental health, there is still an increase in kind of mental health issues amongst the younger generation. And I think one thing that we're all quite passionate about is not necessarily providing answers to problems, but very much proactively providing our readers with strategies to help them deal with stressful situations like these, and you know, other more sort of day-to-day stressful situations like starting a new school or dealing with friendships. So that's something I'm very keen for us to develop over the next year. But more than that, I just want, you know, I really genuinely want our readers on both sides of the Atlantic to have something that comes to their house every week with their name on it, that, you know, genuinely provides them with a great source of information and entertainment and inspiration. And you know, we will continue to do that as long as they want it, and we'll continue to invite them to share their opinions as well, and to help us decide exactly what The Week Junior is going to look like going forwards.
Thank you, Anna. We're just starting our journey with this fascinating, outspoken, powerful generation. And although it might be a while until they are consumers in their own right, we are already really seeing an influence that they're having within their family and wider society. They have some very, very clear ideas of the brands we heard earlier from the children themselves. Some of the brands they talked about, and it's the minutiae of detail that they notice, whether it's the little bits of plastic at the ends of laces from certain brands, and they really do want that authenticity and trust in the credentials of brands to back up what they say they're going to do. And we conducted a recent poll with our US colleagues, a YouGov poll of Gen Alpha. It was a NatRep audience poll in the US, and we found that 78% of children believe that their actions can make a positive difference. So some really positive and positive mindset coming through from the younger generation. But even more importantly, an even greater majority, 84%, wish that adults would listen to them more. So I really do think it's our jobs as adults, parents, media owners, and marketeers to listen to them, because and to really understand the values that matter to Gen Alpha, because they are slightly different and they want to be heard. but they do feel empowered that they are going to make a difference. And I think it's our jobs just to help them along this journey, because like you say, ultimately they are still children. They want to laugh, they want to, one thing that we're quite proud about is that we do have some great imagery and things that kids still want to learn about, and kids will still be kids at the heart of it, but they do use their power for a little bit more of a moral compass, and the environment seems to be something that they feel very, very strongly about. And then the same poll that we conducted in the UK, in the US, found that 4 qualities that they really do value in leaders and adults are honesty, empathy, the ability to work with others, and integrity. And those are four things that we do feel that bind the children together, whether it's UK, US, as top 4 characteristics that they really do want to see from their leaders and adults around them. So it's really our jobs as the adults in this to listen to them and help them on this journey. And we have found with the Week Junior that we do have a tone that speaks directly to them. It's not about patronising, it's not about looking down at children, it is talking to them at their own level. But they certainly keep us on our toes, and we have to evolve with them. 5 years along the journey, I feel that we've definitely done that, Anna. It sounds like you and your team have done a great job on listening to them constantly, daily. We get feedback from them, and it's about having an open dialogue with them, and it's not just one way. It is feeding back to them that we are listening to them and changing and helping them along this journey. So thank you so much for your time, Anna, and I hope we have some time for some questions.
Yes, thank you to both Seema and Anna. I think you've been so thorough during that kind of conversation that no one's actually posted any questions into the chat yet. But thank you very much. As I say, it's a really broad range of topics, so it's really, really interesting to hear, right across the board. We've got about 10 minutes or so we can have a bit of a Q&A now. So I think that you can unmute yourselves if you did want to ask a question. As I say, alternatively, you can quickly type that question and pop it into the chat, and we can see what sort of opinions Seema and Anna have got on those questions. As I say, just to kick things off, really, I mean, say if you've got questions, please unmute, and just it'd be great to have you involved. I'll just kick you off with a quick question. I think, really, I mean, have you got any kind of advice or thoughts, through the lens of the Week Junior audience, sort of how brands should be thinking about communicating kind of to kids? Because obviously very broad, there are lots of brands out there and specific brands, particularly for kids. But yeah, any thoughts from either of you, Seema or Anna, really on that?
I suppose for me, coming at it from an editorial perspective, I think it's about, taking kids seriously, actually. So speaking to them, whether that's in an editorial feature or, advertorial content, in a way that shows that you respect them. We don't have to be silly. I think a real kind of trope of children's publishing and product advertising in particular is often, it's very brightly coloured, and it's quite, it can be quite sort of silly and hysterical, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. There is a place for it, but I think there's also a real place for kind of speaking to children quite calmly as well, and taking them seriously, that it's not always going to be about whizzing about being zany, that you can be quite calm and sensible as well. And remember that they are they're really creative. So it's about the two-way conversation that Seema mentioned as well, that giving children an opportunity to feed into a product or a process or a campaign is the best sort of commercial campaigns that we've run in the Week Junior have always been something that's involved a creative element. So inviting children to design something or to contribute something or to write something, that really does engage them. So yeah, just try and think about what they care about, and speak to them in a way that kind of is more of a kind of an eyeball to eyeball rather than an adult down to a child.
Yeah, just to back that up is the authenticity. So I think they are incredibly more knowledgeable than ever before. So you can't hide behind just a statement, I would say, to brands. They will look out, they will call it out if they don't see actions behind it. So even plastic obviously was something that came up quite a lot in those videos, but they really do notice the detail, and they do talk about it. So it's again, like backing up what Anna's saying, that taking children seriously, but they will, that playground currency is going to be quite an interesting one. They do talk about brands all the time with their peers, and those conversations are different, and they will talk about how brands are doing things differently. So they will notice when they switch to paper or are doing things for good or treating their workers differently, whether it's good or bad. So again, that authenticity and back up what you say you're going to do, because these kids will notice and they'll tell others as well.
Yes, one thing to add to that as well is that they are, you know, to be inclusive too, because they are increasingly aware of how products are gendered and how advertising can be gendered as well. And obviously the Week Junior has, you know, we've never tried to be for boys or for girls. You know, we're genuinely enjoyed by both sexes. And we don't try to appeal to one more than the other. We just want to appeal to children in general. And I think increasingly kids are very critical of anything that purports to be just for girls or just for boys, or blue for boys and pink for girls and unicorns for girls and train sets for boys. I think that's, you know, I think most people are already well aware of that, but there are still some examples out there that I know a lot of kids are incredibly critical of, especially when they get to the age of our readership.
Great. Well, we've got a couple of actually related as well, so we've got a couple of questions. So thank you for that. One question is basically around drawing a line on certain brands advertising or being involved in the Week Junior. So obviously, you know, with the title, you know, being careful about the kind of brands there. So again, with that, do we have, like, you know, think of approval processes or thinking about certain brands, or is it on a case-by-case basis? We start with you, Anna, on that.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's mainly been on a case-by-case basis. I mean, in fact, a lot of our advertising is with publishers, so, you know, children's book publishers, and so there's not really any issue with that. I think the kind of things we are careful around would be anything that could be connected to gambling, for example, or potentially also fossil fuels. I think would be something that our readers would call us out on, and anything that would be seen to be bad for the environment. Actually, I think that would be the red line for us. We have to be very, very careful about it.
Thank you. Oh, but I should also say as well, Tom, who asked the question, did say love the product. So thank you for that, Tom. Always good to get positive feedback on that. And again, would you feel there are kind of, going back to looking at the audience overall, that difference between the US and the UK markets? I mean, obviously we know there are differences, but in terms of the way kids respond, the way that kids are reacting to content, are we seeing kind of differences between the two?
As far as I'm aware, no, not really. I think they are equally engaged, equally passionate, I mean, equally curious. You know, again, as I said earlier, you know, in our surveys, both in the UK and in the US, it was the climate and the environment that really kind of topped out for our readers. So I think, you know, they are similarly positive, similarly keen to be able to take their own practical action where there are problems, and similarly driven to kind of, you know as much as they can about everything, and equally outspoken as well. You know, you know, the debates are proof of that, I think.
Hopefully a good sign for the future.
I've got to throw in a cute animal picture both sides of the Atlantic as well.
Yeah.
that works, doesn't matter where
that always works.
Yeah, that works really, really well. Thanks, guys. We've got a few minutes left. I was also just going to ask, actually, I think one of the things about the Week Junior is the format, because the Week Junior is a magazine, and, you know, that's the main format. So just wanted to kind of ask about that, really, in terms of the format of a magazine with kids, and why you feel that's kind of as successful as it's been.
Well, you know, it's I think it was a surprise to a lot of people that it has been successful, actually, because when we launched, I think, you know, for years kind of preceding that, the fear in the children's magazine industry was that, you know, devices were going to take over and children would never want to read print, and it was a dying art to produce a publication for children. And I think with the younger end of the market, you know, that's become increasingly reliant on entertainment brands and plastic cover mounts as a way to sell a magazine to a child. Whether or not they actually read that magazine is a different matter altogether. I think for us, you know, I think what we've managed to do is to, you know, show that if there is something, you know, if a magazine is created with its reader front and foremost, and with their, you know, in terms of making it really accessible to them, we kind of broke all the design rules for a children's magazine. It's not full of crazy colours, it hasn't got type all over the place, or, you know, wacky pictures. It's actually written, it's actually quite, you know, quite a simple design, but it's clever, because what that means is that it's easy to read. And so everything that we do on our pages is about encouraging a child to read. And what we found when we launched was that we had an incredible amount of feedback from parents who'd subscribed, saying that their children were not readers. They didn't like reading, they struggled with it, they were very reluctant. And they may even have been reluctant to read the magazine when they first got it, but once they started reading it, they didn't want to stop, because, you know, partly I think because it has been designed in a way that kind of lures them in and takes them on a journey on each of the pages, but also because there's genuinely something for every child in there. You know, there is everything from politics to fortnights, you know, to cute animals, to space, to a big fossilized poo in a museum. I mean, there's literally something for every child in there. So I think it's all about, again, taking, you know, we've taken our readers seriously, we've treated them as, you know, intelligent human beings who are interested in the world, and we've tried to feed that curiosity. And I think the great sort of benefit of that for a parent who's subscribing to the magazine is, for all those parents who are worried about the amount of time that kids are spending on screens, the Week Juniors suddenly becomes a great antidote to that. You know, they can spend time on screens, but they will also read. So I think, you know, that's it in a nutshell. I think you give them something they want to read and they'll read it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Sorry, just to back up that point as well, there's a couple of things that we know just about children is, one, they like routine, and what this gives them is something that is delivered to them. And I think, Anna, you mentioned this earlier, having your name on something that is specifically for you actually means a lot to a child. When you obviously you get the post delivered, and it's usually for the parents, but this is specifically got your name on it. It's my magazine, and it's delivered usually at the same time every week, and they start developing a routine, whether it's a Friday routine or a weekend routine, and dipping out. And one thing that we know about kids is they do like some element of routine in their life, and whether that's through lockdown or not, this is something that's remained consistent in their lives. And I think that's another thing that we found that has been quite successful in both kids and parents. So we hear about it if the magazine's running late, basically.
That's amazing. Well, look, guys, we are an hour, actually. That went very, very quickly. I think, you know, again, just because of how interesting the topic is, and there's a lot of great stuff that we've discussed today. So I want to thank everybody for your attention today. Thanks for the questions, and particularly thank you very much to Seema and to Anna. As I say, I've been talking about a lot of topics there, so really interesting session. So thank you very much to you guys. And again, if you haven't checked out the Week Junior yet, please do. I mean, if you've got kids, then I think, you know, very relevant. But even if you haven't, worth having a look. And again, we'd like to say thank you for coming along to the session, and thank you to MediaCom for getting us involved. So yeah, it's been really good to be in the session, and thanks again to Anna and Seema.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day today, and try not to look obsessively at the news. That's my main advice for the rest of today. All right. Yeah, I think it is going to be impossible. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good day all.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.